But I get much less interested in the also rans. It's like once you have Moog and Arp and Buchla and a few people uh, and who made contributions, but it's like, okay, then everybody started building them. You had all kinds of people building analog voltage control. Then you had all kinds of people building samplers. The real question, I think, is what happened that touched the market in some sort of big way, got the attention, said, hey, you to musicians and things like that. A lot of those instruments did. The telharmonium failed. The Hammond was very successful. The telharmonium was ahead of its time. Again, the technology, the aesthetics, the industry, those elements that you have to have, sort of like having Jupiter and Mars aligned. If the stars are right, then your instrument, my son, may become an impact in the marketplace. If they're not aligned properly, and I don't think anybody but that fellow I was talking about, Aitken, who'd done the series on radio, has talked about this sufficiently. Or I don't know about the books if they have, but I think it's extremely important. So it's kind of a rundown. Synthesizers, maybe being a different idea, even though I mentioned the Moog, it was a performance instrument. The idea of a thing that you can make the entire texture of a musical production with date from about 1929 with instruments in Paris uh, that had a four-note capacity and a paper tape reader, looked an awful lot like the RCA, which had a paper tape reader. The Hannert orchestra before that in 45 had a paper tape reader, except the reader rolled over the tape. It was a 55-foot long table with cards on it, the graphite markings and improbable stuff. Again, the technology wasn't viable to move into the market with it at that point. So yes, the RCA, because Milton Babbitt and a whole group of people at Columbia Princeton utilized it in the way it should be utilized for avant-garde music. They tried to do pop tunes. It was laughable. So Olson and Ballard had done a wonderful development of the RCA. And then you have things like the Kima and uh, on up into that idea that you're really not going to play this thing live. You're going to use it as a basis. MIDI, as much as I don't like MIDI, for the reasons I've articulated, I need to write a small book, uh, is an important development. It's almost like a dog that walks on its hind legs. You don't critique, you applaud. The very fact that the industry could get together well enough to have something that was the subject of an agreement, it hasn't happened much since then, frankly. Or as I'm fond of saying, the wonderful thing about standards and protocols is there's so many of them. We just, well, look at what we got now: Blu-ray and HD DVD. The same sad story as beta and VHS when tape, and on and on and on. 45s versus 33 and a thirds. You know, over and over, the industry has been shown you'd be a lot better off just getting past the format wars and all everybody start to make some money and everything. It'd be better off. Like, how many people really have one of those high definition players now? Not many. They're expensive. Why are they expensive? People like me are hanging back. I don't want to buy another thing, which I have many of, that's now superseded. So it's strange. So synthesizers are kind of like the non-performance area of the thing, the studio aspect, the non-real time is one stream and the performance things are another stream. Synthesizers came out of instruments like the theremin and stuff like that in a very distant past. Not in their design, but in their thrust. People are going to play these. Okay, fine. People are going to program these. Okay, fine. Now we have this dichotomy. And it was stuck there. And this was recognized at the Cologne studio. One of the principals there wrote a tract and said, well, gee, it'd be awful nice if you could play this Trautonium-like instrument, this instrument that Friedrich Trautwein had there, or the mellochord, as well as do all the tape manipulation and everything. But that pretty much fell by the wayside for aesthetic reasons. And interestingly, the Cologne studio, a lot of people have never really just thought about it very much. they were not really that interested in exploring the vast new textural world of electronic music. That's not where they came from. Pierre Schaeffer was more like that in Paris. Stockhausen in particular, and Eimert, and to a certain extent some of the others, uh, were more interested in exploring dodecaphonic music. In other words, we've gotten to the limit of what an orchestra can do. If we want to serialize everything, including rhythm and dynamics, and you're just not likely to spread this amongst the orchestra and get it to come back out in any reasonable sort of way. So what do you turn to? You turn to a mechanistic way of doing it, to a programmed way of doing it. And the proof of that pudding is very simple. What did they call the publication, the house organ, if you will, of the Cologne Electronic Music Studio? Die Reihe, the row. They didn't call it electroacoustic music or whatnot. They called it the row. And in particular, in the early days, they were interested in sine waves. Very pure, very much oriented toward that cognitive world of 12-tone music. Yeah, they were extending dodecaphonic music. They were not necessarily exploring that sound world of electroacoustic music. That changed quickly. People began to roll in this. Well, you can do either. You don't have to do either musique concrète or electronic music, which there was this antipathy, naturally.
Yeah. So the row was specifically talking about 12-tone.
It talked a lot about 12-tone stuff, but it also talked about electronic means and, how they were doing what they were doing, and informative articles. And there were, of course, these composer symposia at Darmstadt and places like that, and Donaueschingen before then. I guess I'm saying those approximately correctly. I'm an American. I don't have to worry about European pronunciations.